Crier, you are going to be leading our meeting today. So please begin with call to order and
Call to order, please.
Perfect. We'll just start with a roll call. Crier,
Here.
Donahue,
She was just here. Oh, there she is. She has her sound.
Did you call me? Sorry, yes, I'm here. I didn't hear you.
Bird, Myers, here. Pengilly,
Here.
Greenberg. We're going to go into minutes.
Oh, new business, minutes. Has everybody looked over the minutes? Are there any questions about them? Any discussion? If not, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the August meeting.
Is there a second? Can I second it?
No, we need somebody to second.
I'll second it. It's Pete.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, next, the improvement project, application, Boise State University and City of Boise. Superintendent Arco, would you like to?
Committee member, chair, I guess, this meeting prior, I would like to make a proposal that we move this agenda item and move it just below the Golden Eagle Audubon Society Improvement Project update, because we are awaiting another representative from BSU. Is that all right?
I think that'd be fine.
We don't need a motion to move the agenda, or do we?
Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe so, since we're still gonna cover it.
Correct.
Restoration in the Boise River Corridor, Golden Eagle Audubon Society was the applicant. You had recommended that council move forward with approving that project. We had submitted a memo to council alerting them to that recommendation and seeking any feedback that they might have. We have not received any indication that we shouldn't move forward. So I am working with Kristen Janowski.
Jetski.
Thank you. Kristen Nojetsky, who's on our park side, who leads riparian restoration volunteer efforts. She'll be our project manager for this project, and working with Rob and the Golden Eagle Audubon Society to craft a memorandum of understanding so that we can get this project moving. So the next stage would be this memorandum of understanding that finds out how the funds will be spent, how the project will be managed. That goes to council. If that receives approval, then it would go with an opportunity for us to implement the project. I've talked a little bit with Golden Eagle Audubon. They're going to engage in some planning activities, but they understand they're not able to implement any of the project until they have council approval. But things are moving forward, and it looks like it's going to be a great project. Does anybody have any questions?
So when is that expected to be approved by council this month?
We are shooting for November.
November.
Just because I think that's realistic.
Yeah.
We're working through, we just had a call, I think, last week. We're working through sort of the elements that need to be involved in the agreement. And then drafting an agreement, which then will go back to the Audubon Society, and we'll negotiate a little bit. So I think beginning of November is probably realistic. Yeah, and you've done a great question.
And the Golden Eagle one, that was one for 48,000, correct?
Correct, yes, that in your packet the application is in the back of your packet, and their request for funds was $48,000. There's a lot of good work that's going to be done with volunteers through that effort, so. Great. Okay, well, I think Kelly should be here in 10 minutes. Do you think we can? Yeah, okay, get started. Great, let's go ahead and get started. Chair Crier, if you'd like to.
Then we now move on to the improvement project for Boise State University and City of Boise. Superintendent Markle, would you like to introduce our guest?
Oh, yes, so this is Mariana DeGraw. She is a professor at Boise State University in the School of Biological Sciences, unless the name has changed. Department. The department, close, okay. And she is the applicant for these funds, although we've worked with her, Martha and I have worked with her to kind of define a scope and get a sense of kind of what we need from a land management perspective. Steve Hubble is with us. He's with our Public Works Department, and he is the, I did it wrong.
Climate Action.
Climate Action Manager, thank you, Steve. There is an intersection between this proposed improvement project and the work that the city is doing within the Climate Action Roadmap. So he's here to help us understand that intersection. Martha Braybeck is with us again, 2 repeats. Martha's our foothills restoration ecologist. She is taking the bulk of the work in managing and restoring habitat on the 5,000 acres that we own. Obviously, she's not working in every single one of those 5,000 acres, but she's done a lot of great work. And you only get to see, unfortunately, a fraction of it through these meetings. So I'm thinking out loud right now that you should come back and maybe do an overview of all the things that you've been doing at some point in the future. So that's who we have with us today. Last month, you were given an application to review. It's a joint project between the city, a proposed joint project between the city of Boise and Boise State University to try and pin down the carbon sequestration potential of soils in shrub-dominated ecosystems. This is the first time the committee has seen a science proposal. So we can have a moment of silence for that if you'd like. Because it's a lot harder to understand what's happening when it's not necessarily a direct benefit. This Golden Eagle Audubon Society Improvement Project is very straightforward, right? We're gonna plant trees, we're going to engage volunteers. We're kind of taking a step back in the process with this proposal. There is not good data to help us document the ecosystem benefits of our open space reserves beyond the market value of property. And we've been utilizing that as an ecosystem benefit. We've invested, $20 million, well, actually not that much yet, $12 million in property that's worth $45 million in today's dollars. But when we start talking about the ecosystem benefits, it's really hard to quantify. So one way to quantify it is to offer a carbon sequestration potential of the soils in the open space reserves that we manage. Last month, we talked about briefly how it dovetailed with our climate action map. And we talked a little bit about, whether or not we were gonna have questions for the next meeting. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Everyone's back, Mariana's joined us. I only received some questions from Michelle. I didn't receive any questions from any other committee members, but that's okay. That's what we're here to do today. And so what I just want to make really clear is that even though the city is a co-applicant on this project, and even though we have staff recommendations to move forward, the role of the committee, the role of you, is to decide if this project conforms with the conservation criteria that you put together for improvement projects, and to have a good discussion about how levy funds would or wouldn't be appropriately used to fund this work. So what I'm hoping we can do today, and I don't want to single you out, Michelle, but I think the questions you were bringing up were good discussion points that we should have. So if you can say them or not, I can pick them up if you want me to. But what I'm hoping we can do today is sort of open it up into a question answer type, informal fact-finding opportunity here. If the committee feels comfortable at the end of this meeting, because this is all we have, I have one update I want to give, which will take 5 minutes. But for the next half hour, we can have a good conversation, robust conversation. If the committee feels comfortable making a recommendation today, great. If not, if there's more information needed, or you feel like you want to have further time to deliberate, that's okay too. So With that being said, I would open it up to the committee to, share their feedback on the application, any questions you have, any concerns you have, and then between the four of us, Martha, Steve, Mariana, and myself, Dr. DeGraff, you can call me Mariana. Okay. We'll do our best to answer your questions.
I'll start. I really think the project was very well designed. Everything that you're controlling for, the soil type, even the exposure of the slopes, the areas of the different reserves would really cover all the habitat in our reserves. But I'm just struggling a little bit trying to make a decision. I mean, I think it's a good thing, but then when I think about $100,000, I kind of hesitate. And this could be like going in a weird direction, but what happened is I was driving up 21 and I noticed yet another project sign, public notice sign. And I was looking at it, and I was looking at the habitat, and there were some sunflowers and rabbit brush and some sage. And I just was thinking, oh boy, here goes another area that's probably gonna be scrapped and turned into asphalt and glass and steel. And we're gonna lose some more of our stuff, our natural space. And it made me just think about like the big picture of our committee, are we really focused on preserving land that we think is valuable? Or, do we put money towards studying something that may have a use later on? Maybe not a direct use, but something later. So then I called Sarah and we had a really good conversation, and she encouraged me to, bring this up because like she said, that's why we're a committee, because we think about things and ask. And so I was thinking like the information that we would gain from this, would that really be guiding us in acquiring property? Like a lot of times it's just like an opportunity, a private landowner says, hey, I've got this for you, and it's a good deal. And so we're gonna go for that, Will we really seek out these areas that have the best carbon sequestration potential in them? Yeah, and then I wanted to understand more about the city's climate action plan. I don't think I have a good feel for what that is about, like the carbon credits, and I think understanding that better might help understand the importance of this project more. Would you be able to talk about it, Steve?
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that if it's the appropriate time to jump in. The city developed a climate action roadmap, and just roadmap is a surrogate for plan. It's a climate action plan. It set two primary goals and laid out a path for how to get our community carbon neutral by 2050. And so what does carbon neutral mean? There's that word, those phrases are net zero and different things are tossed around a bit. It means something different to everybody, and I think often fits with the context at which it's shared. But for us, I think of it as a tiered process. And so where we start is we measure and calculate the amount of emissions that we produce as a community. That's primarily driven by the fossil fuels that we use in our transportation and in the energy that we use in our buildings, so that the electricity and natural gas. So we know that collective output in, we measure it in metric tons of CO2 equivalent, carbon dioxide equivalent. So we know that's our starting point. We know what that is today. That's going to change over time, but the goal would be to get that down as close to zero as we can out to 2050. So that's stage one. And in terms of what the plan lays out and where we're headed, that is the near-term focus by far, is finding ways to reduce emissions. And of course, there's a litany of things in there that we can do to do that, which I won't go through to try and be brief. We know, though, that there are portions of those emissions that we don't have a fossil fuel-free solution for at this point. Example that I can point to is jet fuel. So we calculate the impact of the air travel that's generated from the airport from city residents. At this point, there's not a deployable technology to replace that, and we don't see that in the near future. So that begs the question, as part of our carbon neutrality goal, should the city work to either sequester or offset that carbon that we're not going to have a solution for? And that's still a policy decision that's yet to be made by city council. So I can't give you a specific answer on how we're going to deal with that. Bringing it back around to this project, I think that's where it ties into those discussions, is that if the city did decide to pursue sequestration, which I guess in some ways we are doing now. We have urban tree planning initiatives. That's a form of sequestration. We're starting to try to quantify those benefits. Should we want to grow those programs, the question might be asked, how could that be accomplished in the foothills? Maybe so. And then this would lead to the discussion of creating science that would help us quantify the benefits of that. And I think as to how it could potentially tie to the work that you all do in terms of open space preservation is, would there be potential for others to get involved in those processes going forward? You know, we have the levy now, but at some point that times out. So would there be other funding sources or partners that would be interested in the corporate space potentially? If yes, they probably want to know what they were getting involved in, and then this science would potentially help us answer those questions. So I know that was a lot, like pause and.
Oh, yeah, no, that's good. So the corporate, like if there's a corporate polluter and you want him to kind of zero out, you would say, why don't you buy this land in the foothills because it's producing these plants and we know it's offsetting what you're doing. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
I would probably see it in the long term more tied to restoration than to preservation.
Okay.
Because generally to generate a credit, you have to do something.
Oh,
so you have to take current
mitigate.
conditions and improve them somehow. So the thought would be that this analysis might give us that baseline in terms of what locations would be good to do that. And then we could potentially, or Martha's team could potentially develop some projects, go out to other parties, let's just say, to be vague, and then, create investment from them to execute those projects. And obviously this is all conceptual. There's a lot of things that would still have to be laid out to get to that point.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I have a question, like Michelle brought up, we're not gonna base purchase of property on the carbon sequestration score. We're gonna base purchase of property on what's available, what we can negotiate with, and what's available at that time.
So committee member Pryor, committee member Myers, the ability to acquire property is much more multifaceted than whether or not it is ecologically in the best interest of the city. It comes down to relationships with property owners, it comes down to market value. So I don't see it realistically an opportunity for this to be the direct reason. But it may be a reason for us to go speak to other property owners and develop new relationships and
Because I think you know where I'm going with this, is that I don't know how to explain it. I would not know how to explain this to somebody who voted for this levy
In the grocery store.
in the grocery store
Yeah.
about how this is gonna benefit them,
Yeah.
when they're not gonna be able to mountain bike it, hike it, or let their dog run. And that's the thing. I mean, I think it's a good project, but I don't know if we're the right avenue to support this. Because it's a big, huge scope of a project. I mean, it really is. I mean, I can certainly see like federal funds. And because this is a multi-year project, I mean, correct? I mean, this is gonna take years and you'll have graduate students and students involved in this for years. And I don't know if we're the right source for funding like this, because it's gonna be a constant need for funds for this for probably 10 years. And I don't, over for years, really.
No, we would go
We'd
in,
be able to do a study fairly quick.
yes, we would do it in 2 years. We would begin it and finalize it in 2 years. And then the data that we would acquire would allow you to predict into the future what would happen to your carbon in the foothills depending on, if a fire comes through in your vegetation. Or if we want to do a restoration project and different vegetation. How does that affect your carbon sequestration? And all the data that we get within a period of 2 years would allow us to predict that.
So it would be quicker than I thought. Because and I'll go back to what you said. If I look at the two things we have here, the Audubon thing, that's easy to talk to people about. This one's really, really hard for me to talk to somebody about in the grocery store.
So I think I just wanna, real quick, can we make sure that we speak up where
Oh, I'm
folks
sorry.
online are having a hard time hearing everybody?
Okay.
Thank you. So, two things I wanna say. It may not be a benefit to helping us acquire new properties in the short term. That is true. It may be a benefit for helping us justify why we acquire properties in the first place. And it also will help us with quantifying benefits again of habitat restoration and our existing efforts in a different way that might open up opportunities for the city to either describe how they're currently offsetting climate use or find new markets for climate. But yes, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And I understand why it should give you some pause to think about whether or not this is an appropriate use of levy funds. That's where we go back to the application package, right? And we look through the conservation criteria that you've already set up. We look through the application itself and see if it aligns or where it doesn't. I would also point out that their BSU is providing in-kind funding, in-kind resources, I should say. And so we wouldn't be the only funder necessarily of this project.
Yeah, we essentially have matched the project, and Kelly and I both are, you're working for free, pretty much. We're not requesting any salary for it.
Which you couldn't, because no levy funds could be spent on administrative costs. So that would be something that would not work. The way that I believe that the budget has been set up is that the bulk, that the city funds would be going towards the sample, having the samples analyzed, the soil samples analyzed.
Yes.
But in graduate.
As well as
It's all
the
broken down
students
by-
and people who are running the samples.
So that is a point that I probably should have noticed and flagged earlier, because those are associated with staff salaries and administrative costs that cannot be funded through the levy.
Yeah, well, that's a huge part of it,
Yeah.
so it's problematic, yeah.
Pretty much.
My bad, when I read it, I thought it was going towards samples.
Even though it's a salary, they're not really administering like planning and all that, they're just like out there collecting the data, and it's still, it's an admin type.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd ask Rob, is it an administrative cost if it's compensating time in the field?
It's a good question. I don't know that there's like a clear answer to that. Arguably.
There is a bunch of anniversary narratives, so we can certainly go over those costs and go through.
Well, and I think at this point, it's just a matter of making sure everybody's clear, as to what they're making a decision on.
And Sarah, we could also address that if there was some sort of agreement that's where we could actually detail out what are eligible expenses and what are not eligible expenses. So we could always work out those fine details if the board found something to be unsatisfactory, or alternatively, if they wanted to explore reimbursing some additional expenses, we could always look at that.
So really the question before you is, does this improvement project application conform with the use of levy funds? And then we would work through the details following a recommendation from you and a recommendation from council. Council wouldn't approve it until we have an agreement.
Yeah, this is Pete. Can you hear me? I tend to agree with some of the comments that have already been made. It just seems like from the bigger picture, what the taxpayers had probably envisioned when they funded the levy. I'm not sure this fits the criteria. I'm not questioning the quality of the study or anything. A little bit like what Matt was saying. Just hard to explain the value to, you know, the citizens that are they're footing the bill for this. And like I voiced last time, I would have some pause about how we protect the information as far as intellectual property. Who's that going to belong to at the end of the day? And just the whole contracting issues with universities. No offense, but I've been through it with other universities. But it just seems like from a higher level, I've had questions about the prudency of this investment from the get-go. So, you know, I don't know if I'm looking for a response or what, but it's just, it's hard to explain to somebody that would ask me on the street why we're spending $130,000 on their money, you know?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I can really quickly explain what I would say to somebody out on the street or in a grocery store. I would explain to them that there's too much atmospheric CO2 and it's contributing to climate change. Soil stores a lot of carbon, particularly soil that has shrubs growing on it. And when the carbon is in the soil, it's not going to into the atmosphere and contribute to climate change. When we are faced with things like climate change, for example, we are losing vegetation, we need to restore projects, and all this is going to affect the amount of carbon that's sequestered in the soil. And if you look at the land area that the city has, it really contributes to quite a bit, actually. And so being able to predict how restoration projects in the future are going to contribute to reducing atmospheric CO2 levels is, I think, a very, very good project.
Do you want to address any of, he mentioned some concerns about intellectual property.
Oh, yeah.
Pete, can you elaborate what your concerns were so perhaps Mariana can address them?
Well, when I've dealt with other universities, they've insisted on being the owners of the information at the end of the day. And sometimes the funders are not necessarily the owners of the information or the study or however you want to put it. And I think if we're funding it, we should, you know, have some of the rights to the intellectual property.
Yeah, so I think things might have changed because pretty much every time we get a project funded, our data are the property of the funding agency. And we are required to share our data and provide forward access to them within a given amount of time after the study has been finished. So,
What is the budget for Parks and Recs? So you know,
And
just
sorry,
what's the budget for Parks and Recs? Just
the total budget for the
total budget for
department?
Parks and Recs.
Oh, good.
Just-
I want to say something like 33 million.
32 million. Because I think this is a really good study that should be done. But I can see it being funded better by Parks and Recs,
The general fund.
the general fund,
So when we talk about Parks and Rec funds,
It comes from the general.
a portion of it comes from general fund, a portion of it comes from revenue that then goes back to support programming. So, when I say that the total is 33 million, that's not all money in Parks and Rec's pockets for administration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. Because I think, like I say, I think this is an excellent project.
Yeah.
I just don't know if we're the right source of funding for it. In the city budget, it would look like nothing. I mean, realistically. But in our budget, it's a pretty good job. But I think it should go forward, but I just don't think we're the right, my feeling is we might not be the right funding source for it, but it should go forward.
They're putting in 20, I thought,
Yeah.
Who?
the Park and
Parks and
Rec.
Rec.
Oh, yes, that's out of the open space budget. Yeah, that's what we have.
10,000 public
Oh,
works.
Yeah. Catherine, do you have any questions, concerns, comments that you'd like to share?
No, I turned on my video during Pete's discussion just to sort of add some support. I was sort of silently nodding along. I think the comments that both Matt and Peter have made, and then the concerns that initially initiated the conversation from Michelle were all sort of on point with how I'm currently feeling about things. You know, Matt's last comment with, and I don't necessarily think it helps us in our discussion right now, but I do agree that I think the science is there. I think it's needed. I think it's a very valuable project, and certainly is in line with a lot of our goals in terms of what our purpose is with this committee. I'm struggling right now, not to say that I'm completely against it, but I'm struggling right now to see the connection and that this funding is an appropriate source at the moment. That's kind of where I'm resonating, but I don't have specific questions. I just really appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the guest presenters. I think all of the information that's been shared so far has been very value added, certainly. So I think this has been a really good discussion to be a part of. My apologies for missing the last meeting. I know that you guys discussed this at the last meeting. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm right in the mix of where the other comments that you've been hearing today, I think so.
Anybody else have any questions or comments they want to share? Do you feel like you'd like to
So
make a
Sarah,
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
what was our goal for today on this?
Well, the goal was to talk, answer questions, answer your concerns or thoughts, hear your thoughts, since we didn't really have the chance to do that last week or last month when you just received the application. If we are ready to make a recommendation, we can do that as well. And then the next step would be, I would take the application, the project to mayor and council with your recommendations, and they would decide what they want to do.
You know, I'd feel more comfortable if we had more of the committee attending
I
to
can
make
understand
this,
that
like
for sure.
Scott and
Agreed.
Stacy. And,
Agreed.
you know, they have some expertise that we here may not have.
So then, we just received applications for new committee members. I don't know when their service will be starting.
The mayor's office is working on getting them scheduled for an upcoming council meeting, so it should be fairly soon.
Okay. I do tend to agree that we're kind of a small group here today. But I think maybe if it's okay with Mariana and Martha and Steve, we can defer a recommendation until we have a meeting with more participants and maybe a robust conversation about you know, whether or not they agree with you. And we can defer a decision until a time when we have more folks at the table.
And superintendent article, I would think too, to revisit the salary thing.
Yeah.
To see what that's like. I mean, if it's, you know, if it's less money, I think it's a little more conducive to like accepting, do you? I mean, this
No.
is, no,
To me, it's not necessarily the dollar amount, it's how do we justify spending our dollars on this project, which I think is a great project, don't
I know.
believe
I
me,
believe
but,
that.
but I just don't think it's the right
Funding source.
funding source.
Yeah.
That we're the right funding source. But I do want to hear, I'm not a hard science person, so I do want to hear from some people like Stacy, who is involved in these types of things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Stacy's input would be great. Yeah, we definitely could. I saw that there was a note in there, I think from Catherine, you remember Elliot, about having a special meeting. We could definitely do that. We could set something up that would work for everybody. And in the meantime, if there's particular items that you would like myself, Martha, Steve, or Mariana and her teammate Kelly, to follow up on, we are happy to do that. It sounded like from Rob in the discussion that we you know, we don't necessarily have to work out all the details in terms of what the partnership would look like with regard to whether or not you recommend that it move forward. So if you recommend it doesn't move forward, then we'll take that recommendation to council in a special meeting. If you recommend it does move forward, we'll take that to council, and then we'll have to work out, iron out a fair amount of details still before we have an approved or project, so.
I can work on getting some, I'll reach out to everybody and see if we can get something set up so this doesn't get paused for another month.
Okay.
Try to set something up before that, where we can have everybody, join.
And I'd be fine with online meeting.
Great, okay. Yeah, we can do it all virtually, I suppose. Or are we required to do a hybrid?
One person needs to be in person.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe we could send out a doodle poll,
Yeah, definitely. I'll reach out to all of you.
something like that.
Yep, I'll find a time that works for everybody.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts and your concerns. I think it's a really good conversation to have. Like I said, this is the first time we've had an application that does not have like a direct on the ground benefit. So I think in terms of experience of understanding how we are going to be looking at improvement projects of various sorts, it's good to have this conversation. So with that, we can move on if you'd like, Ms. Chair.
Okay. So our next item is committee updates.
I have one update for you today, and we do not have executive session. Yeah, last night, actually I have two updates. Last night, Boise City Council and Mayor approved the purchase of the Horizon Hills property, that 29 acres. So congratulations, you have bought more open space. Pursley property, yep. We are going to be moving forward to close, hopefully by the end of September. Because that's when our fiscal year ends, that's my deadline. But yeah, that's good. Like I've said in the past, we're not going to be making any changes to the existing trails and access that are up there. All of them are informal, all of them are social. But this allows us to sort of begin to seek to formalize and protect public access and public property and habitat in an area of the foothills that really has no open space reserves or protected public access. So this is between Polecat Reserve and Siemens Gulch, and good job. It took 2 years, but we got there. Yay.
Kendra,
Yeah.
what feedback did you get from the public after it was publicly announced?
One email came in from a neighboring property owner with some concerns related to the details of the exhibits, the new survey and the easements that were needed, which is what took us so long to do it. So I'm vetting those concerns with the property owner's attorney and with the surveyor. But that was it. So it's good. And I think one thing to take away that should hopefully make you all feel good is, you know, the Pursley's property values have gone up since we negotiated the purchase price with them, almost doubled based on a broker's opinion. And the family stuck with the negotiated price till the end. And so it's just a nice reminder that, you know, we have a supportive community. So The other update I have, committee members, we are beginning to construct the Hopkins Trail loop. This is another project that's been going on since 2016 for me. We purchased the Hopkins Trail, the Hopkins Range Reserve properties in 2015. And it has taken that long to go through the environmental review process associated with the trail portion, the trail, because it's on BLM land, portions of it are on BLM land. We received public comment and engagement on this project in 2017, 2019, and again in February of 2021 through the virtual education event that we did with Rich Rivers, and then the subsequent survey about the pilot management program and also about Hopkins Range Reserve, as it will be a directional trail. It'll be almost about 6 mile loop. So we're working through that and hoping to continue to be able to construct that trail and then the trailhead with the hope of opening the area up for public access in the late summer of 2022. One of the couple stipulations or specifics about that area, we worked with Fish and Game. Their main comment was to close it seasonally for critical winter habitat, so we'll be doing that. And then also just because there's some good intact grasslands in there and good habitat with some native rare plants, we're not going to do a network of trails, just one loop to try and preserve the quality of the landscape as it functions for wildlife.
So it won't connect other existing trails.
No, we did originally try to work with the property owner adjacent to connect it to Sweet Connie Trail, but that property owner is not interested in providing an easement at this time. So it will be a closed loop.
So would people, if they didn't want to hike 6 miles, could they go like out 3? Oh, not out 3 and back 3, done. Out 1 and back 1.
Yeah, I think the way that I have to look at the trail plan right now, but I believe there's a spur that's one directional. But it's, it's sort of like Stack Rock. You're kind of going there as a destination.
Okay, sure.
But it is beautiful, and if you did have a day to do a hike, it would be a lovely place to be. So, and the public feedback that we received from the survey indicated that people were supportive of it being a one direction trail.
I think around the mountain at Bogus is, people will see the benefit of that, especially when it's a 6 mile loop. I mean, that's a nice ride,
It's a nice ride, yeah.
nice fun. So, yeah.
But I do think you're right, Michelle, it's probably good to make sure that we have a section that peel off.
Yeah, cut off.
Okay.
And they're doing executive session today, so any other business at all, or should we go to adjournment?
Well, I have a couple. I'd like to thank our presenters for coming. I hope they don't feel like they wasted their time because of some of our comments, but I appreciate the work that you guys have put into it and the project itself. And Sarah, I'd like to thank you for all your hard work on these other projects. You gave a timeline on how long it's taken to come, some of these projects to come to fruition. And I think that's great. So thanks to you and your team.
Agreed.
Any other comments? Okay, any move for adjournment?
Any motion, right?
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn meeting.
Is there a second?
I can second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Bye.
Okay, we're good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I will be in touch about setting up a special meeting sometime soon.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.